call it the order since we don't have a quorum at this time, and as soon as Mike or Sandy gets here, we'll go ahead and call it the order. How do you want, I mean? how
Well, I
in-depth do
think
wanna
you
get
had
before they get-
suggested that I just address some questions, that you put out pretty general questions and have some time for Q&A, and I don't know how much you folks have done as far, or who's new and that sort of thing. However, I know that getting down to AIM is a good thing. You learn an awful lot down there in a very compressed time period. I don't know whether you've done that or anything, so is that something you have done, or down at the, what do they call it? It's the training.
Accelerated municipalities.
Yeah,
It's
it's a good thing if you have the opportunity. It makes a lot of difference. Cause it covers the waterfront A to Z completely, and I won't pretend to do that. The first topic that I was gonna look at is just the open door law. You know, it all starts with the public's got the right to know just everything you can think of, unless there's just a really good reason they shouldn't. One came up here recently, I saw, in Tippecanoe County, the school system, hosted an executive session for, internet security, and I thought, there you go, exactly. You know, they have things like water security or whatever, things where it's clear that you gotta have confidentiality, or there's no point in running an operation where you talk security in front of the public, and that would not be smart. And there's other exceptions that I'm sure you're aware of. You've got, sometimes you get in a lawsuit, you need legal advice, your lawyers can advise you, you're gonna get together in an executive session, there are other exceptions. But in general, anytime you are together with a majority, you have a public meeting, whether you post it or not. The problem is, if you didn't post it and you're in a public meeting, you violated the open door law. There's no particular penalty for it, except if you do anything in that meeting, it's null and void, it just doesn't count. It never happened. And so, you know, I think it's like this meeting tonight, we probably could have said, oh, well, it's just to orient new members and things like that. My default position is post the meeting. Meetings are awfully easy to post, and there might be that odd member of the public who would be odd enough to want to come and look in and see what you're doing. So my default position is always that. I've certainly been involved in a good number of executive sessions, but those are because you need one. You got a 5-member body. Because class 3, you have a presiding officer who's the mayor. The mayor, obviously, or as you already know, I'm sure has the option to break ties. So if you didn't have all 5 members and you had a split, that the mayor would get to break that tie. In general, the body only acts by a majority. It doesn't have the authority to act unless the majority wants to do it. Now, does that mean that always happens? Well, not always. I mean, if it's at least the way I encourage people to operate is, if it's clear that everybody wants to take a 5-minute break, hey, everybody want to take a 5-minute break? Great, let's go take a 5-minute break. Until somebody says, hey, I don't want to take a break. Okay, well, let's vote on it. And so to me, that's the most efficient way, because nobody really cares whether you're taking a 5-minute break or not. So why, make it formal and put it to a vote? However, I think that meetings move much more clearly, make it a lot easier on the clerk treasurer if you start with a motion as opposed to end with a motion. And I have a feeling you probably are pretty good about saying, let's have a motion, let's get this thing going, so everybody knows what you're talking about, so you're not off talking about 100 different things when really there's only one thing that you're trying to get past. And so a motion, a second, and then discussion is certainly handy, certainly easy, certainly a lot better and quicker and more efficient. People can follow the conversation that way, they know what's going on, why you're talking about this, that, or the other thing. Because a lot of times, members of the public will walk into a meeting and they really don't know what much is going on, they don't know much about procedure. And so if you can point it out to them, here's the motion, here's the second, that's what we're talking about. It's helpful for the public to know what's going on.
Does
Yeah.
a motion have to be something definitive, or can you just say, I would like to make a motion that we open a discussion about something? Because if you're not sure about which way you want to go about something, maybe if you have, like options on it, how do you proceed with that?
It's uncomfortable for people to say, I move that we spend $10 million. Oh, I don't want to be the one to say spend $10 million, but the reality is a motion is put forward in a specific way. And it is not unusual. I've seen people go, I'm not sure I'm even going to support this, but in order to get the motion, I'm going to make a motion to spend $10 million. So the point being that you should have an affirmative motion to do some specific action.
Okay.
And then you don't have to vote for it. People go, oh, well, if you made the motion, then you have to vote for it. No, actually, you don't have to vote for it at all. You can vote it down every time. It's a little weird and it's a little uncomfortable. It's parliamentary procedure, but that's the way it's supposed to go. Now, I can see why, you know, the presiding officer may say, hey, the topic is spending $10 million. Let's just open it up for discussion, see where it goes. You know, you can do that. The presiding officer wins until the majority overrules the presiding officer on anything, on any call. So, a presiding officer says, let's do this. If there's a majority that says, no, we don't want to do that, then they win. Because the body is what's important, not any individual. Even the presiding officer is just, you know, the person who happens to be calling balls and strikes, sort of. It doesn't determine who wins the game. It's, you know, call it a referee if you want to. They're not really part of the game in some respects, because the council has the mayor presiding just because that's the way the law is set up. Anybody been involved in towns? If you're a town, you got 5-member, you don't have a mayor, you got a 5-member council. The president of the council's the mayor, is the way it works. That is the executive. That person is in charge of doing an awful lot in between meetings. They speak as the mayor would speak. They have to go do stuff. You know, you got stuff going on tomorrow, they go take care of it. So you're a hybrid. You know, you get to a second-class city, then you have the mayor doesn't even preside anymore. No tie-breaking function there by the mayor. So each level of government has a slightly different and more separate, if you will, type of government, closer to the federal system, where you have very clearly defined roles with, you know, the three levels of government: executive, legislative, and judiciary. So you are obviously the legislative body. You have the power of the purse. You have power over all dollars except, well, there's a few that you don't. Edit, I guess, is kind of a hybrid. You have some control, but not direct control. You have not much control over RDC money. You have complete control over bonding. You have complete control over large borrowings, I guess is the way to look at it, because a bond is nothing more than a way to borrow money. And you have complete control over all legislative functions. Whether you have this rule or that rule and speed limit in a, you know, this neighborhood or whatever that is a law passed is going to be yours. You've got majority rules, as we talked about. If there's a tie, then the presiding officer and the mayor gets to break the tie. There is a veto power that the mayor can veto things, and you can override a veto with on your body 4 out of 5. You got to have at least 2/3.
Is there anything that ever requires a unanimous vote?
Some things, like suspending the rules. So
Okay.
you folks have a pretty darn good code, and I just saw that, I looked at it this afternoon. You updated it like 2 weeks ago, so
Yeah.
good for you. Better than most places, I'll tell you that. And so your code, well, there's state law, and state law says majority rules. You can't change that. If you wanted to, you can't. State law says certain things. But then you do have some control over your own procedure. Robert's Rules of Order apply, like, you know, from every level of government and any civic groups or anything else. Robert Rules applies unless you have different rules. And you do have some, you know, different, I won't call them different rules, but you do have some specific rules of procedure. And so when you have rules of procedure, such as, I think you're 3-read on ordinances, you folks have to read and pass any ordinance 3 times. So anything that is going to impose a fine or is going to restrict somebody's actual, what they can do with their property or whatever they can do, any of their activities, that's in the form of an ordinance generally. It has the force of law. It's a local law, but it's as enforceable as a federal law or a state law. And it has the ability to impose a fine. And so that is an ordinance. It takes 3 reads. Now, if you didn't want, yeah.
Can you suspend the rules?
Right.
That's what.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. I'm going a long way around the horse. That's all. That's why nobody wants to come, because I talk to them. So you can suspend the rules, and sometimes I'm sure you have. Suspending the rules means that you're going to look at the rules that you've already put in place for your organization and say, hey, we're not going to use that rule this time. And so you have the ability to suspend the rules by having a unanimous vote to suspend. Okay, so for example, you really gotta get it passed, it's not an emergency, but you really need to get this passed. And so, it would usually take 3 readings, and so you would say, I move to suspend the rules so that we can read it twice tonight, or the 3rd time tonight, or, you know, all 3 tonight, whatever you want to. And so you would ask for suspension of the rules, and the body has to vote unanimously to suspend the rules. And then, if you're gonna pass it that 2nd or 3rd time, you have to have at least 2/3. So, if you wanna if you want to create an exception for your own rules, you have to have the horsepower there, everybody's pretty much gotta agree with it. So that's an example of where you have to have unanimous vote. I can't think of anything else that's got unanimous. You know, some things are funny, APC like is a 1 read. If you get area plan commission stuff, that's state law says you read it once. I think you're still under area plan, or are you under?
We are, I thought state law said you have to have a decision within 30 days.
Yeah, and I think that's correct, or it passes, you know, it could go into effect, but it also, I think, some of them only have to be read once by you, even though your rules say 3, the APC rules say only once, just to keep the ball rolling.
I think we still just try to do it 3 times.
Well,
in one
and if
reading,
nobody cares,
suspend
nobody
the
cares,
rules. Right.
you know, and so if nobody, you know, cares enough, it's 3 different readings that's not a bad thing, you know, gives people more time to think about stuff. So, go ahead.
Going back, you said that council had complete control over bonding and some other things, but not edit and RDC. Can you go in depth a little bit more there and explain?
Yeah, and you have an RDC, you have a redevelopment commission, and you have TIF funds, you have, I think you have do you have any abatements in effect, or you use TIF funds? I'm not sure you got any abatements, you might. Abatement is just a way of, and it has to be passed by council and RDC, or recommended by the RDC, that you would bring a business in and say, hey, we're gonna abate your taxes, you know, we're gonna reduce your taxes for a while to encourage people to come. So that's sort of one side of the same coin, because if you're a business coming to town and you're gonna abate their taxes, hey, great, look, their bottom line just got better. The other side of the same coin is, we're not gonna abate, but we're gonna give you tax increment financing, which means, since you brought all this assessed value to town, we're now gonna give that back to you in the form of stuff, like infrastructure, like roads, like whatever. Okay. So, that's RDC money. RDC can spend TIF without your direct control. They have to bring their budget to you on an annual basis, but you actually don't even have approval authority over it. It's kind of odd, but it's supposed to come to you so that you can look at it, talk about it, pick at it if you want to, discuss it, and I don't know whether you generally pass it, I don't know, maybe you do.
But last year was the first year we generated any TIF revenue.
Okay, where's your TIF? Is that
Packers to downtown, no, Packers is the county's TIF.
Oh, that's right, sure it is. Okay, that's out. Okay. So anyway, that's RDC. You haven't had much of it, but I'll tell you, like in some communities, the RDC budget is as big as the general fund budget. I mean, it can be substantial. Not that it always is, or not that it will be. And it used to be RDC spent money without any oversight, and things got a little messy, and Carmel particularly. And so the council was put, statewide, state law gave council more oversight and authority, mainly on bonding. So if you're gonna go out for a long-term loan, that's council business, that's not RDC, they don't approve. They can recommend, but they don't approve the loans. So they can spend TIF money, you know, an odd 1,000, 10,000, whatever on some project without your direct control. You have reviewed it, but you didn't get to say yes or no to it. And that's still sort of an oddity in the law. So that's RDC. And edit, you approve a plan, as I recall.
We do budget edit, so the city
Oh, you
council
do
actually
budget,
approves the
okay,
budget
so
for edit.
he didn't have to budget edit, he could just ask for a plan approval, give you the plan, you guys would look at the plan and say, yeah, that looks good, and then the mayor has control over the edit budget to spend it, but it's already budgeted, so it's the same kind of.
So we actually go to the
revenue force.
common council for approval of the budget.
Okay, let's say that, I know that, from the budget information we were given at the end of 2019, there was a hefty amount of money in edit. So is there anything that can be done with that money, or does it just stay there? Is it an ongoing fund?
It keeps getting replenished, and it's got very broad expending power. I mean, you can spend edit on more than you can spend almost anything else on. Very, very broad ability to spend that.
So if there are like things in the edit budget that are line items that money is being earmarked for, and there was something different that you wanted to do, like pay down our water bond or something like that, how does that process work? Is that
You just-
allowable?
It is, if you got it as part of your budget, it's just a question then of modifying the budget. There are certain things you can switch in, and I'm not the master of this, you would know more about this than I would directly, but in terms of between funds, you can move within funds, you can move money. The mayor can, clerk treasurer does, doesn't need council approval. If you got one major item, you can't move, you can't bring, money without council approval from one major budget item to another. So it would take approval to change it. Now, within the edit budget, I don't know. I've never seen edit budgeted generally. It's not something everybody does. You know, that's the thing, in Indiana, mayors are strong. It's a strong system. Some states, mayors cut ribbons. You know, that's it. They really don't have much to do. That's just
I
not.
think what I found is DLGF has no interest in our edit budget at all.
They don't look at it.
No,
much.
they don't even.
Well, they know it's so
consider
broad, there's nothing they're gonna pick
looking
at.
at it.
So
But
it's-
I think it's been a good idea that the city has budgeted
Sure.
the edited funds.
Smart.
Because there again, it's like, you're open. You're
Mhm.
showing the money coming in, but you're showing what you're spending it for.
Mhm.
But you can't just randomly, he can't come in to me tomorrow and say, we got extra funds, let's take this and let's pay on this over here.
Mhm.
He just can't do it.
Although theoretically I could if we didn't budget it, and if we
Yeah,
just,
that's correct.
Mhm.
And that is the fund that mayors use for just a whole bunch of stuff. You name it. Economic development, income tax
Yeah.
is very broad. And that's why the DLGF doesn't care about it, because they know whatever you spend it on is okay, because you can spend it on almost anything you can think of. Okay? So, other sources of funds, you folks have utilities, you've got a water utility, you've got a wastewater utility, you don't have electric, do you?
No.
I always thought that was odd. Logansport, just as you know, probably went through that, paying for them. There's a lot of places that do have an electric utility, surprisingly still. I don't know how they're producing their energy, but, you've got those sources of funds, those are controlled, through the Board of Works. Those are, generally, gonna be spent pursuant to a budget, and that is gonna be a budget that'll be presented. I assume you're seeing the budget, from that, presented to the council, but not approved by the council.
no. We haven't, I don't think the city's ever presented utility budgets to the council.
And so, you know, it's not a requirement, but, the State Board of Accounts, DLGF, they audit them just like they audit everybody else. And so the range of things you can spend it on are less. You know, you don't buy police officers or fire trucks with that, you take care of the sewer utility. So since it's a much more narrow budget, then it doesn't get as much control, as other, like, general fund budgets.
Could the common council by ordinance require, the executive branch to bring budgets to the common council, either for review or approval?
For that, I don't think they could require that, no, because state law doesn't require it, okay? In terms of approval of the budget. Again, it's presented, I mean, they can go look at it, they come to the Board of Works meeting, but I don't believe that the utility budget could be forced by the council to be, approved by the council. And part of it is, remember historically, there's the debt limit, right? Constitutional debt limit. And so a lot of the back and forth and up and down and high-priced Indianapolis lawyers that have been involved for the last 60, 70 years in government are how do you have more than the constitutional debt limit? That goes back to general fund. General fund is limited by the Constitution. These accessories are not. RDC is not limited by that constitutional debt limit. The wastewater or Board of Works funds, not limited by that. That's not a constitutional limitation that applies. And I'm not saying it's smoke and mirrors, it's the law. And so that's how it is operated.
So if the water, wastewater, if they have
to make your budget, that would be then up for audit by the state.
And it is, you get audited, you've got a budget, it's just not approved by the council necessarily.
So, but once if the council approved for a budget to start being made, it would
Yeah.
be also audited.
And it is right now. I don't know how often they look at the,
Every year.
is it
Interesting.
everything every year? See, I've heard they go every other year sometimes.
Yeah, you know, I think Delphi had a 2-year audit one time. Otherwise, we can look at it every.
Okay, so you're saying it's presented to the council but not approved by the council, and
Apparently it is
you're
not here.
saying that it has
In
not
some
been,
communities,
In some
has
communities,
not
they
been
present it.
presented to the council in the past, is that what you're saying?
he's not saying it's statutory, that
No,
that's
some-
how
no,
communities
okay.
operate.
Well, here's an example, Battleground,
Yeah,
the council is the utility board,
Okay.
the Battleground Council, 5 members are the board of works, if you wanna look at it that way, so, do they see it? Yeah, because they are the council also, but they don't approve it. City of West Lafayette, it's presented once a year, board of works approves it, and then the next council meeting, it's presented, and the council members ask questions.
so as the legislative body, should we be looking at like a monthly budget report for the different
Like the utilities?
departments and,
Well, for the departments, sure, because that is your budget. I mean, each department, I'm not talking about wastewater being a department, I'm talking about police, fire, you name it.
okay,
But, yeah, you know, it would not be unusual to have a, what's the term, utilization percentage, here we are, you know, it's 2 months in, and we're 2/12 spent, or whatever, so that would not be unusual, that could be a report that could be requested, obviously, and I think it's something you're probably keeping.
I think Shane has already asked me this year, and as soon as we roll over the year and started, so starting it won't. Yeah, you won't see it until the March meeting,
Right.
but what you will receive is an appropriation report. That
Appropriation.
appropriation report is divided by departments, both within the city's general budget, but it also shows your waste and your wastewater too. It also shows all your grants, but it will show you what is budgeted in a line, in a column that comes down, and it will show you the expenses for the month, and it'll show you the balance in that account. So you follow your budget right through that.
so what happens at the end of the year for like the departments that are required to have a budget, if there's a surplus or a deficit?
Well, deficits are a problem.
I
They
mean, is
generally
that
are
something that
deficits.
we have,
We don't
is
have
that something
Surplus
that
is
we
not
have a
unusual.
liability for, or some accountability for, is that
Yeah,
purely?
well, you can't spend what you don't have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. She gets in trouble when she writes that check and there's no money there. So their overspending is not an issue because it can't be done. Now, you might be halfway through the year and have 99% spent. Well, there's a problem, you know, because then your department heads are going, where do I get gas, you know? But that's sort of a catastrophic issue that I don't think is a concern of yours. Or I shouldn't say it's not a concern of yours, it'd be a concern if it happens. It just doesn't happen.
Is it, okay,
And then at the end of the year, it's not unusual to have additional fund, you know, you have your personnel budget's 75%, 80%, big chunk of your total general fund expenditures or personnel, and you then fill one position, so you got extra money at the end of the year, because it's easy to not fill a position, it's impossible to overfill. You can't overfill and hire more people than you're authorized, so if you're gonna have anything, it's almost always gonna be a surplus, and then, you know, depending on what it is, you can hold it over, encumber, thank you. Okay. Let's see.
I think you will
Yeah.
occasionally too, Gail, you'll see at the end of the year, there will be certain line items that will be in the general budget, and they could be negative. There's one in my clerk treasurer's office that was negative $56.10, but there's also a like number that you transfer that money from that line item to that. Doesn't mean I've overspent my budget in the clerk's office whatsoever, I have surplus funds I turned in. But it just means that one line item was over, so you transfer funds. And that's a process that's state board. So-
How are you, Eric Burns?
Mike Isley, nice to meet you.
Nice to see you, Mike.
Let me go ahead and call it the order at 6:23, now that we have a quorum. we can continue doing what we're doing.
So that's back to the issue of being able, as a department head, well, the clerk treasurer, since you are the department head and the clerk treasurer, you can move stuff within your own budget, around. That doesn't mean, you're gonna overspend the gas budget, cause the gas went up, but you underspent the other one, so you move some money, and, that's an easy thing to do. Additional appropriations, I don't know how often you do that.
Once a year in January.
It comes up, and that is appropriations, the magic word for council. Council appropriates. Nobody else can appropriate. Appropriate is the process of allowing money to be put into a budget to be spent, to make it eligible to be spent, and that's always a council function. So if there is a need for an additional appropriation, it gets advertised so the public can see that there's more money being spent than was approved. There's a state board of accounts notification. I don't know really how that goes. You can explain it. DLGF.
Yeah,
I always say SBOA, but it's really
Yeah.
DLGF. So you're gonna have that. I would say most bodies have it regularly, but not every meeting, by meetings, but you have appropriations,
And
additional
that comes from
appropriations.
the general fund.
Yeah.
Is that,
Any budgeted fund,
Budgeted funds.
I don't think we've seen an additional for any other fund in the last 4
In
years.
general. Yeah.
Maybe fire territory, I guess
Fire
it's 427 to
territory.
428.
Fire territory did.
So as far as the role of the legislative body, I think we've covered that, fiscal and passing laws. Let's see, as far as, your duties, yeah, you take an oath, and your duty is to know what you're doing, what you're voting on, why you're voting on it, get all the answers that you need before you take action. Because you folks have 3 reads, I don't know how much you suspend. You suspend very often to expedite the readings or to compress the number.
20% of the time, maybe less.
All right. And so that builds in a buffer, to give you that extra time. I mean, I know that people don't like to do it, but I've always encouraged bodies, particularly if they have 3 reads, is, yeah, you're just seeing this, you just heard about it yesterday, okay, well, you could pass it, because you got 2 other shots at it. But people don't like that, because it's like, oh, if I vote for it once, I have to vote for it again. It's sort of like, you're talking about bringing up something, well, I'm gonna make a motion that we spend $10 million. Shoot, you may not wanna bring that up, because you don't wanna be the person that brought it up. However, you can vote it down, you can bring it up just to make it an issue in front of the body, and then when it comes time for voting on it, I'll vote it down. Well, why'd you bring it up? Well, because that's the procedure, so everybody knows what we're voting on, okay? So it's a similar kind of thing. You've got the ability, if you're doing 3, which is a lot, most are 2, then you got 3 months, basically, where you're gonna be able to see this. And the mere fact you read it the first time, say, hey, and it's not unusual to say, I'm gonna vote the first time, I don't have enough information to vote the second time, so I'm gonna need some more before I'm gonna go forward with it.
and then how does that vary for resolutions, because that's just a one
Just a
vote
one.
thing, and it's almost,
Yeah.
I don't wanna use the term crapshoot, because there are times when there might be a plethora of information put into a resolution, and we may not, have everything we need, and have
That's
the
a bit-
time to,
That's why you move to table. That's why tabling is an up or down, yep, you're either gonna table it or not. I move to table, you vote, or you get a second, and then you vote. And if the body, again, the body's in charge. If the body by majority wants to table, there's your month. You just got an extra month, or until whenever your next meeting is. And that's why moving to table is considered a preferred motion, so that you can get stuff, move forward on the calendar, so that you don't have to deal with it at that exact moment.
do you have any, recommendation or advice as far as how much legislation we should be looking at? We only meet once a month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I happen to notice that in Lafayette last year, they passed 18 ordinances in the whole year. So they weren't seeing too many pieces of legislation, and we saw, I think, 5 or 6 pieces of legislation at our first meeting, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 before us for our next meeting. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I couldn't tell you, why Lafayette would have so few, actually, because that isn't many, that really isn't. I guess things are static, is one way to look at it, things aren't changing much. Because anytime you've got an ordinance, you're either spending money, which you're gonna do every single year, you're gonna do a salary ordinance every single year, you're gonna do a budget every single year, you do some other things every single year, and then the rest of the laws depends on what's changing in the community, I guess. And as far as the ability to be ready for a vote, you got an obligation to. My view is, you either know what's going on, or you move the table, and if the body tables it, you got your time, if they don't, you did what you could. I mean, that's the reality of it. And yeah, things move pretty fast sometimes. Until I read this afternoon that you had 3 readings, I was gonna suggest that there are a lot of organizations that do pre-council, which is just a time for everybody to go, okay, what do you think, we good? Anybody need any more information? Oh, let's pass this, some really small procedural something, because the pre-councils that, I know Lafayette does it, West Lafayette does it, that they don't pass substantive stuff, because it's a pre-council meeting. They have the legal authority to do it, but most people don't show up thinking they're gonna be passing budget. So they take that pre-council time, 99% of the time, is just say, hey, who's got something? Why don't we, let's get the police chief up there. Okay, come on, tell us what this is about. Okay, fine, and it gives them, because it's the Thursday before the Monday meeting, so it gives them all day Friday, all day Monday to go talk to the police chief and see what's going on. And, you need to give me some more information or whatever the situation is. So, how many you can handle, that's, I would say 5 is not an unusual number. I know a lot of organizations that I'm with do that many, so, hi.
Hi there.
Eric Burns.
I'm sorry, Sandy Flora.
Nice to see you.
It's an
Sandy.
APC meeting, so.
Okay, there you go.
So,
Okay,
I have a question.
yes,
So
sir.
now that we all kind of are here and we be considered the majority of a meeting, so say, that Sandy, Mike, and I are meeting outside of here and not discussing city business, does that then constitute a meeting? I don't believe it does.
So 3 out of 5 council members are
Not discussing
outside.
city business.
As long as you're not discussing city business, you can go to a party, you can go to the ball game, you can go to the basketball game. The problem is perception. You're standing in the parking lot, and there's no posted meeting, and you're there for an hour. To me, it's a perception issue. Did you talk about it? No, you actually talked about the Super Bowl the whole time. Okay, cool, glad you did, And to me, it creates a perception, but, you have, the law is there for a reason, and you can use it to allow you to do exactly what you described, to have that, have that 1 hour conversation that didn't touch any city business.
So a follow-up question to that would be, so say that I want to talk about this, let's say an ordinance that I'm trying to get together.
Okay.
And I email them, the other members of the council, not a CC, not a copy or email. And 1 or 2 of them emailed me back with their kind of thoughts. Does that then constitute a meeting, because it's almost like a conversation?
It's not a meeting, but it's a public record. Okay, email, I've always thought it's an odd little difference, and if somebody's gonna get bit, we just hope it's not us. Because it's gonna happen that there's gonna be such a robust conversation. Well, I'll vote for that, yeah, I'll vote for that, I'll vote for that on email, yeah, I'll vote for that. Well, is that a meeting? No, but it's getting awful close.
Right.
And so, it is clearly a public record, which means that if somebody said, hey, I'd like to see all your emails that pertain to anything with the word fire truck in it, okay, yeah, you have to give it up. And so, I think I encourage people to know that by taking on a public office, you do limit yourself. It's like people go, God, lawyers go, I'd love to be a judge. Really? Would you? Because when you're a judge, like one judge I knew said, you should never come out of a liquor store when you're a judge, because you're gonna walk out and there's gonna be some guy you just sentenced for drunk driving. And so, public office limits you to an extent. It shouldn't limit you more than the law requires, but your example is one that comes up all the time. And it's fine, but all the emailing back and forth pretty soon gets to be, you made a decision outside of the meeting, and that's not what you're supposed to do. And the other thing is that even receiving information, so that's the lightest possible thing. And I'm a bad example because I'm your lawyer, but if somebody came, fire chief came to you and said, hey, I think I'm gonna need some more money next month, okay? And there's 3 of you there, and you just received information about a public matter. And it's hard to explain to the fire chief, I'm not picking on the fire chief, why you can't do that, chief. There's 3 of us standing at the coffee shop. You can't come up to us because you just created a problem. And that's difficult, it really is.
Does the topic for the case of the council have to be legislative in nature? So if the fire chief said,
No.
we had 2 runs this week, which is nothing that the city council would decide on, they're still receiving information, but.
I need more money because I had 2 extra, I don't know, yeah, gets into gray area, and then get back to that whole perception issue. And, the other thing is, we're small towns, we see people all the time. We have all sorts of things in our lives that are not, if you live in Indianapolis, you wouldn't see the other council members, every day at the same coffee shop. So, yeah, it creates a little bit more concern for it.
So, okay, so then you talk about receiving information, me sending an email saying, hey guys, I'm working on this, that is them receiving information.
Yeah, but it's also, it's also not outside information, you're discussing at that point, you're making a discussion. Well, here's the other thing, who's a Republican, who's Democrat? So you can always caucus, right? So if all 5 of you were Republicans, you 5 can go caucus. You 5, all of you can go caucus. That's not a public meeting, that is a political caucus. You can't make a decision, but you can say, I don't know, I think we ought to vote this way. Oh, I don't know, we ought to vote that way. Because you can prepare yourself for it politically for what you think you want to do. Because the political parties are allowed to do that, independent, Democrat, Republican. Now, it doesn't, if you're broken up, independent, did you say?
We have 2 independents, 3 Republicans.
Yeah, so the 3 Republicans can meet as a caucus, but you just can't, you just have to be careful. And, if I were sitting there, and I've done it in executive sessions, let's not get into that, well, that's not on the agenda. Okay, fine, let's not get into that. It's sort of the same thing. You don't have to post it, you don't have to tell anybody about it, you can go caucus whenever the heck you want, but you just need to do it right, in my view. You took an oath, and you ought to fulfill that oath, and somebody ought to be going, we don't want to, don't say, yeah, we're gonna all vote for it. Well, I'm in favor of it, that's fine. Are you gonna vote for it? I think I probably will. Yeah, you can have that discussion, but that's because it's a political caucus, and it only applies to the 3 Republicans, because otherwise the 2 independents are not a majority. Majority is the king. Majority is what gets you the power that you have and gets you in the trouble that you can get into.
Do you know of any good resources for, sorry, going back to motions, but main motions, subsidiary motions, I've got, and I need to buy
Which one do you
this
have?
Robert's Rules.
I got the thinnest little Robert's Rules that is so beat up.
Got the 11th
That's a
edition.
killer.
Yeah.
That one's a killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one that's,
Are there any good resources for the council for?
surprisingly, you Google Robert's Rules, simplified Robert's Rules of Order, and you're gonna have 99% of what you need. You got the other 1% embedded somewhere in there that probably doesn't apply. But I think procedurally, you don't run into a whole lot of real procedural issues, truly, that are gonna interfere, because the majority rules, majority rules, majority rules. It's a simple rule. Eventually the majority is gonna rule, no matter
I
what
think Lafayette
somebody else
has
wants
an
it.
ordinance or a resolution that says that they will abide by Robert's Rules of Orders except for where it conflicts with Indiana code, like you can't have
Yeah.
secret meetings,
Right.
things like
Yeah.
that. So do we have anything
I
that,
do not, I was.
You got a few little things. not
We
much.
do have rules of procedure, but we don't have anywhere where we've adopted Robert's Rules. of
No,
Order.
you are correct. And so by default, well, again, guess who gets to do that? Presiding officer, until the presiding officer is told, no, the majority thinks we're doing it differently. So presiding officer could say, this is how we're doing the procedure, and I made it up right now, it's not Robert's Rules, and then, okay, as long as you go along with it, that's fine. Or, wait a minute, presiding officer, we, the majority, wanna use Robert's Rules, and here they are. And that majority wins on all issues. It feels like the presiding officer always wins, generally does, because generally the presiding officer is doing what needs to be done to get stuff going and keep things moving, which is part of the job of government, is to actually move with some sort of speed, so that you don't just drag everything down.
is there ever a time, like, let's say, we've made a motion to vote on an ordinance or resolution, we've gone through the process, gone through the 3 readings, we've done it, and then we realize there's some glaring error. So we have to amend that with another ordinance and go through 3 more readings,
Just
correct?
one.
Just one.
I mean, it depends a little bit, but if you are taking, if your ordinance covers A, B, C, D, and you go back and you want to amend it so that it throws out A, B, C, and D and does E, F, G, H, and I, well, guess what, that's a new ordinance.
Okay.
If you're changing what was there, it only takes one reading. An amendment, and so, an amendment means that you're changing something within it, you're not changing the whole darn thing, throwing it out and pretending that you're amending it, because you're just subverting the rule at that point. You know, Scrivener's errors, very handy, wrong spelling. A lot of times, presiding officers will say, we'll just treat that as Scrivener's error, any problem with that? No, good, we're making the change, great, you don't have to vote on it, you don't have to slow stuff down until somebody says, wait a minute, I wanna spell it this way, okay, whatever, now we can vote on it. But in general, it just keeps things moving, and an amendment is only gonna take one time, if it is truly an amendment. If it stays within the same parameters of what that ordinance was, and just makes a change within.
Can you give us an incidence of when we might need to rescind something or repeal? Am I using the wrong
Yeah,
words?
both are fine, you can
Okay.
rescind, repeal anytime you want. You don't like the way that your building code is set up, that says you gotta, you get into zoning pretty quickly, but, let's think here. Weed height. You know, gosh, 6 inches is too short, we ought to make it 12 inches. So you don't have to get a ticket until it's 12 inches. Or you decide we're not gonna worry about weed height, we don't care anymore, or grass height is what I should be saying.
Would that be an amendment that you think?
You can
would
do
take
that,
1 or 3
just
readings?
like that. To me, if you've already got one on the books and you're going from 6 to 12 or 12 to 6, that's an amendment, that's a 1 read. The other way to look at it is if you're getting more liberal, if you're letting people do more, heck yeah, who's gonna argue? If you're getting stricter, and you're gonna say, we're going to amend, for example, we're gonna amend the fine from 25 to 250, kind of a new ordinance. Because the person who just got fined has the right to ask, well, when was this published? It's gotta be published anytime you impose a fine. That's the clear-cut case of, you better have your publication right, or somebody will challenge it in court and win. But in general, 1 read.
Statutory or Robert's rules? Where's that from?
I think it's both. I'd say it's statutory more than it's Robert's rules, because I don't think Robert's rules really would get into that.
So if we're looking to, and that happens to be one of our
Yeah, what kind of thing?
issues coming up, an ordinance violations bureau, and there's gonna be some probably changing. How much input do we need to offer to the public, like, and do we need to have a separate public hearing for some of these things? Do we have a time, like when we're addressing it during the council meeting, to open the floor to the
Do
public?
you have comment on ordinances as they go by?
We don't, we just have
You
to.
wait to the end of the meeting. Yeah, and so that's all the law requires. Well, actually, the law doesn't even require that, actually. You don't have to let anybody talk,
I
a
just
member of the
know
public,
that-
but most
Right.
places do.
Like a school board meeting, you have to make your, request known at the beginning of the meeting that you want to speak to a certain agenda item.
And that's just a rule of the body, that's just a procedure.
So if we wanted to do something like that, I mean, not every time, but if we wanted to have that available, so if we're talking about something that's gonna impact, you know, a great number of people in the town significantly, and, you know, our constituents have said, hey, I wanna, you know, have an opportunity to speak on that. How do we go about getting that
Now,
done?
that's about, well, first of all, what's your standing rule? Your standing rule sounds like people are allowed to speak at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so if these are, if there's a 1 read or 3 read, back to the point here, if you only have 1 read, well, I guess it's too late, because they spoke
Yeah.
after you've already voted.
Yeah,
If it's multiple read, then that's not the case, and they would have the ability at the end of the first read to say, wait a minute, don't do this, don't read it again, or don't approve it again, this is why. You know, the law does not require that members of the public get to speak. They get to observe, they get to record, they get to be there, and they get to watch their elected officials do what they do, and if they don't like it, they get rid of them in the ballot box. I mean, that's essentially the power that you have. There are public hearings that are required for certain things, but it's not for your general run-of-the-mill operational, ordinance violations. You have an actual ordinance, OVB, you have
Yes.
one now, so it's just a question of changing some of the stuff.
Yeah, assigning fines that previously were
Yeah.
just statutory, the 2,500 limit.
Yeah, well, for example, we recodified a year ago or so, and that was a 2-read. Again, this is, the entire code is redone. Gonna do it twice, because that's a lot of words, and why do you think you're gonna get it right the first time? Do you have that requirement? Depends on the topic. Depends on exactly what's changing, and my position would be, if you're making it more strict, that's more likely something you better have all the readings that you need, because you are imposing a bigger burden on the citizens, as opposed to a smaller burden.
So let's say we're on the second reading of an ordinance, we have a motion and a second, we're in the discussion phase, could a member of the council move to recess for public comment on this issue?
I have seen people that, and this is sort of a conversation that the council has, is, first of all, nobody speaks until they're recognized, and really the chair ought to recognize, so it ought to be, hey, Mayor, I'd like them to be able to speak, okay? Well, that's a reasonable request. Mayor gets to decide whether they speak, because he's the presiding officer. And if the council thinks that's wrong, I take exception to that. I want them to speak, get a majority. Back to the point, majority always wins. So yes, you can do that if the majority wants to. Can overrule the chair. Doesn't happen very often, and it generally doesn't happen a lot, because the chair pretty quickly gets the idea that they want to hear this, these people speak, so the chair is going to start recognizing that person. But my point is, and it's frustrating to me, and I understand how it goes, and I don't know how your meetings go, but to me, it is unfair for people from the back of the audience just to be able to stand up and start talking. Because if you're not that personality, then I guess you don't get to speak. They gotta be recognized before they speak. That happens a lot in a lot of places where it's not right. You ought to recognize them first, let them talk, and then everybody gets to talk first before that person gets to talk again. So, at least in my view, that is not good for the governance of the community. That's just somebody who wants to be a squeaky wheel, and okay, they can write you a letter too. Sir?
So say that you're working on an ordinance to, there's some punitive amount, right? You said 3 readings, that's the norm. Let's say we get to reading 2, we wanna amend that, we don't quite like the way it's worded. We decide to make another motion, and if there are changes, does that now start over?
No, that's a one. My position is always, you've got the right to amend the matter before you, petition, the ordinance, whatever it is before you, you have the right to shape it 10 times a meeting. And then, once it comes out the other end, it's what it is. Okay. So yes, you can shape it, make changes, you can even enhance, make a bigger one. My point is, if you just gutted the whole thing and said, we're gonna triple all the fines at the last reading, I came to the first 2 readings and I thought it was $50, and now you made it $150. That's not fair. You get into this. The law doesn't cover it precisely, but you kind of get a feeling like, why is that fair? Why do we do that? So, there isn't specific guidance on that. Although there is specific law that says you can amend and make that change on 1 reading.
Can you give us some guidance on when would be some pretty important times to have a legal counsel presence on behalf of us at a meeting?
Well, it depends a little bit on how the structure is going from the legal standpoint. You got a city attorney, and for example, I'm city attorney in West Lafayette, and I'm council's attorney, and I'm also the mayor's attorney, or the attorney for the city. And when I'm sitting at the council meeting, I view my job as the council, not the mayor. Because, and lawyers should, most do, have the ability to go, that's why people don't like lawyers. Well, when you said that on that case, well, yeah, I did, that was my client, now this is this client, and that's how you're trained, is I'm now sitting here for the council. And so I'll do what I can to make sure that the council does everything correctly. So, when is it important? I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you when it's important. I think it's always important to have council present. There are some bodies that don't. I think it's a mistake. You take an oath to follow the law, guess what? It's pretty complicated. And I don't know the whole law. None of you know the whole law. And if you've taken an oath to follow the law and you're doing it without a net, then I think you're maybe getting close to not following your own oath, would be the way I would look at it. Because the stakes are high, and you can make mistakes that, you know, cost the town money, city money, so. You need counsel, that's clear for me. Who that is, that's up to you. That's up to the body, majority of the body.
We have a certain amount budgeted for council for this
Uh-huh.
year. And I know that you have conflict with the same night you had mentioned Zach.
Yeah.
Williams possibly.
Yeah, my law partner, Zach, who's
Now,
very good at it.
as far as us making payment to him, are we paying for his drive time, his attendance time?
It's a door, yeah, we have, well, I'm gonna have to, let me talk about me. My hourly rate is, my usual hourly rate is $285. And I have a government rate, the city of West Lafayette happens to be $235. And Delphi, the town, the Battleground, and Carroll, because I'm Carroll County Council too, is at 200, which just sort of reflects the reality of it's a small community, et cetera, et cetera. So we, I charge drive time. I charge door to door. Well, what are you doing when you're driving? Well, I'm reading my file as I drive my wife crazy. And that's actually about half true. But because I charge for my time. And I'm either gonna be charging for you or for somebody else, and I'm not gonna charge two people, but I generally do not take my 14 minutes that it takes to get here, about 18 minutes. So we're portal to portal, door to door.
And is Zach's fee the same?
Well, yes, because I was trying to think, because he's only been out about a decade, and I think his normal rate is 2.25, and he would charge the regular 200, so his rate would be the same as mine. Okay, couple other things. Nepotism, you folks every year fill out your forms. I think that's pretty straightforward. You don't control a person under you. You are likely as council members to have that happen, but you know, I suppose you could come up with a situation where it did. You have a separate parks board, correct? It came up in West Lafayette, a new council member, her kid worked for the parks board, and she made the decision, I'm just not gonna do it. My kid can get another job. I always encourage people when they're in public service, you fall all over yourself to go farther than you need to make sure that things are covered and that it's clear to the public. Because it's the whole perception that we as Hoosiers, quite frankly, or at least where we are in Indiana, we don't have a perception of corruption. And the reason we don't, I think, is because people are pretty sensitive to it. You know, and when I say corruption, I'm not talking about taking money under the table. I'm just talking about people having confidence in government, going, yeah, they're doing the right thing. I don't agree with them, but they're doing the right thing. And to me, the way you engender that is you just fall all over yourself to make sure you're going farther than you need to. So nepotism, not likely to come out. Conflict of interest can come out. Conflict of interest is a crime, and it's easily handled. If you, for example, have a business and you are going to sell brooms to the county, then you should, as a council member, or as a Board of Works member, or as the mayor, or anybody else, you ought to fill out an annual conflict of interest statement that says, I sometimes sell brooms to the city. Okay, whatever. Once you've signed it, everything's fine. You can't make the decision. You can't be the one who makes the decision to buy that, but the mere fact you're on the council, and you've appropriated that money, feels like, well, gee, you just spent money on your own brooms. Okay, you just file a conflict of interest statement, has to be handed to the body that's making the decision. So if it's the Board of Works that's buying the brooms, and they're your brooms from your business, you go give it to the Board of Works, and they put it in their records, and life goes on. Okay, so it's easily dealt with. It's an annual statement. I don't know if anybody's ever got that, but it's always a good idea to talk to council about that. Easily solved. The law is set up to make sure that the public knows what's happening, and if they don't like the fact your brooms are being sold to the city, they'll do something about it at the ballot box. Any question on those things? Public records, creating public records. When you send that email, even though you have not, you send an email to everyone on the council, you have not created an illegal public meeting, but you have created a public record. And so I know that you have a council email, right?
we each do.
And I would encourage everybody to use the council email, because if you get a request for, your emails, which could come in litigation, it could come from the media, you are obliged to give them your private email if you don't use it, your public one. It's a big mistake, because then you gotta segregate it out. And then somebody, maybe it's a judge, maybe it's a public access counselor, gets to go, theoretically, go through all your emails to make sure that they got them. Why do it? Just stick with your council stuff, so much easier. When you send an email about public business, that is a public record that you just created. Obviously, I write you a note, I'm a council member, hey, I think you ought to vote for this, or I think you ought to give the firefighters this or that, and you hand it to somebody, that's a public record. You should keep it, because if you destroy it, you've committed a crime. And that's what people go, well, I deleted all my emails. Well, I know you didn't intend to, but you just committed a crime, because you destroyed a public record without going through the normal process. The circuit court clerk probably in charge in your county, is that true, of the process where you can destroy public records lawfully?
No, it's not it's the clerk's office.
Yeah, that's a circuit
Yeah,
clerk.
Circuit
yeah,
clerk.
it's just- yeah.
So anyway, they have they don't meet enough, quite frankly, because there ought to be more. You got text, you got all this new technology stuff that's gonna bite somebody. For example, I send a text to another council member, I've just created a public record. Now, some texts automatically disappear. Does that mean you just, and I'm not sure that's true anymore, that's sort of old school, isn't it? Aren't they all still there? So you delete it from your phone, you probably didn't destroy it, because it's still, you could still get it from somebody's server. Somebody tell me I'm wrong or right, because I think it's true. If you didn't destroy it, you just took it off your phone. It could still be obtained. So things are funny, you know, and it's because of technology, it's difficult, the law's not keeping up particularly well. Just be careful and know that anytime you do anything having to do with public business, you are probably creating a public record. Anything in writing, any medium whatsoever. Okay?
So using your cell phone to make a phone call.
Well, but you didn't create a record, because there's no record of that unless you record it as you're speaking. Talking on your phone is like talking to somebody, you didn't create that record.
It's out there somewhere.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
not
see
a
what you're
public
saying.
record.
Yeah.
Public record is a permanent, whether electronic or anything else you can think of, a record. Okay? So it's a little tricky, and it's not perfect, the law's not perfect, doesn't align exactly with what technology is doing. I've told my people, don't text. I think it's too uncertain. Don't text public business. Whew, that's a tough one. I mean, if you're the street commissioner and you're not texting, so they do, but they use their city phone to do it, so here's my phone. You know, so they don't have to get into your own private stuff, which obviously nobody wants. Okay, maybe we got this.
How do they know,
I think I
how do they
covered
know
these.
we don't have it, how do they know we don't have it in our private stuff unless somebody looks into your private stuff?
Well, what I would say is, if you are you get a request for public records, it would probably come through the clerk. I want every email from all council members about public business from this date to this date, okay? Or all emails using the word fire truck, or fire, or truck, or whatever. Want all of those, okay? And so, I don't know whether you've had that happen, but if you did, and it's in your council, it's already in your council email, it's just a search. You have the IT person just do a search, pops them all up. They may tell you that it's happening, but you don't have to do the darn thing. If it's your own private email, and you have used it, and you know darn well, and somebody asks the question, gotta say, yeah, I've used it for public email, and that's where the problem starts. Because you could say, and I've gone through and I've given you all, oh really? Well, if it's a lawsuit, and you know, it's happened before, if it's a lawsuit, then somebody, like I said, if they're not satisfied, they can say, Judge, I don't think they're there, because you know, he sent it to her, but she doesn't show that it's on hers, therefore, you could get a court order that the judge would say, we're gonna look at your whole phone. And it's not likely to happen. You know, I'm not saying, oh, the sky's falling, it's a terrible thing. I'm just saying there are things you need to think about and it's easy to protect yourself, because all you do is keep it on your, it's not like you're saying terrible things on your email, that's not my point. It's just that you don't wanna make it so hard on yourself to pull all that stuff and spend all this private time of yours going through when it's a public function, and guess what? The clerk treasurer can just have the IT person pull them all. So, that's all I'm saying, is encouraging you to use the email that the city's got.
Are there any guidelines for us to follow when we as individuals may be looking to, try to create some legislation so we don't have an appearance of like cronyism or favoritism because we're new and people might come and say, hey, for years, I wanted this changed in my neighborhood or in this part of town, and it may be just one person airing a grievance. And I know there were some issues with that with stop signs and intersections a while back. How do we steer clear of that, and how do we, make our determinations as far as when we need to actually put forth some legislation for something?
Well, your stop signs are approved, I assume, by the board.
Town council.
Okay.
Stop
And I've seen it done both ways. It's gotta be approved by somebody, or it's not a stop sign, right? And so you need a stop sign. I mean, I think that's just classic politics. You're gonna have people hate you, you're gonna have people love you, and you just gotta decide what's right. I mean, I don't have any better magic solution other than to just say, you've gotta use your judgment, listen to the people, and decide what you think is needed there, and there will be people that hate that stop sign. They just will. I know, I think you want
Oh
to
yeah,
make
I
the right,
know
so you
we're
go
not
to
gonna
ask.
please everybody, but it just seems like we wanna steer clear of like frivolous legislation too, that,
Right. Well, and you folks, I don't think get into it much, but I've got some organizations that I work with that get into a lot, that we're now gonna pass legislation that will, support this, that, or the other cause, whatever. City's got nothing to do with it, has no control over it, but yet they wanna do it, and sometimes those become contentious issues. Do you have the right to do it? Yeah, they're usually resolutions, you're not forcing anybody to do anything. Climate change, stuff like that has come up. And they get pretty contentious, because people have strong opinions, it's not like it's gonna take money from you, but, those are the kinds of things that create, a lot of conversation and heated conversation, and guess what? It's government, it's gonna happen. So I don't have a good solution for it, except to say it's gonna happen. You're gonna have some people that are upset with me and some people that aren't. So. Any other questions?
Any of the communities you work with have, do any of the communities you work with have committees of the legislative bodies?
Yeah, and that's interesting, because in West Lafayette, we're gonna meet like next week to talk about it, because we got all these committees, they don't do anything. Got the budget committee, works hard, nobody else does much. And so, do you have any?
We do not.
It seems to me a budget committee, yeah, because you're doing it anyway, you're talking with department heads, and a budget committee could serve the function of being a forum where the department heads come in and explain their budget. Council members are gonna have to vote on it, so they get to hear it, so when it comes in front of them, it's something they already heard about. We've got police and fire, we've got wastewater, we got all sorts of stuff, but they tend to not do much. So the only suggestion I would have, if you're gonna do it, start with one you know darn good and well is gonna have some work to do. And just start with one, and not worry about, I would say most of them have something, and a lot of them don't do it. Like a lot of reports where there's no report. A report from the sidewalks committee, no report. Okay. Why are we doing this for 3 years in a row, 12 times a year? So.
Do department heads come to the other meetings that you go to?
Sometimes, depends on the place.
But not like just regularly show up and sit there and,
No,
okay,
well, Battlegrounds got a marshal and got a public works person.
Mhm.
They come to all of them, because they're involved. I mean,
Sure.
they need to, that council's actually voting on stuff that night for them about that comes up on the fly. I think the bigger that the organization is, and you guys are pretty good size, as far as total number, your total employees would be what?
27,
I mean,
26, 27?
yeah, so you got a big group. You don't want everybody there. I mean, why? Why would you? If they're not gonna do anything. I think some of them, if they're smart, they're there, because they wanna hear what's going on, but that's kind of up to them, and the mayor decide whether they should be there. Anything else? Well, good luck this year. Let me know what I can do. I have some cards here. I don't think I got enough. Talk about old school. I'll send you a V card.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
This is.
I'll give the ladies first.
I got your invoice. Well, Sarah,
You can get to that. Okay. Thank you.
I got
You got it?
I said I got your old invoices.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you
All right, that'll work. Okay, anything, parting shots? Anybody seen this book? Good book. This is AIM. Let's see, that's still IAC. That's 2016. I think that's
Yeah.
the most current version. Good book, real quick read. Got statutory sites in it. I'm sure you should get them. Yeah. But I use it a lot because it gets me the citation real fast unless I'm sitting in front of my computer. Yeah. You bet.
I'll go ahead and order 5 of those and 5 of Robert's rules.
Yeah, it's good read. And then there's these. These are free.
They should have those.
Mm-hmm.
They all have a
Yeah.
copy of that.
All right, folks. You bet.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see. Where did I put my code? I put it out
In
here.
the-
Bye-bye.
Be careful on them.
This is the work session, don't wanna do any formal business, is there any further discussion? We'll talk about how great Mr. Burns is,
Do we need to discuss whether we want him in attendance at our meetings, or do we, are we allowed to do that here? We can't make any decisions tonight.
well, we advertise it as a meeting, and it is a work session, either way, we advertise it as a meeting, so we could take final decision. In the past, the President Pro Tem has been responsible for reaching out, so I think we could have the council make a recommendation to the President Pro Tem tonight without it being a formal action.
Yeah, because I would like to hear what your thoughts are.
I can see what he was saying, that it might be good to be there at every meeting, but do we need him there? We may have the money to have him there. But you'll find out over time, I'm real cheap. If I can save money, I save money. I don't like to spend it unless I need to, so if he doesn't need to be there, he's probably got other things to do with life too.
I mean, I
Some
can tell you
kinda-
that he said it will probably be his associate, Zach, because he has a conflicting meeting that night.
Right.
I think one thing he mentioned tonight that probably struck home with me is like, you're gonna be liable and responsible for things, and
But if something comes up, we've got his number, we could call him.
And the city attorney will be available, yeah.
So I think that there's the possibility that if you're introducing something that you might feel is, maybe there's some liability there, and we're worried about it. If it's enough that, say McKinsey, city attorney, says, yeah, there's some liability risk here. I'm thinking that maybe there's a possibility that we should just table that and not pass it that one time, and then maybe have that consultation with him, with one of the attorneys next time.
When you table something, can you bring it up the next meeting?
yeah.
So then you delay that time, you give that time for thinking, when questions, get that legal consult.
And then we could probably send like the documentation that we get in our packet to him to peruse, and I do see the value of that because it would save us paying his drive time.
I do send all that to McKinsey each month too. I would still probably continue doing, even if Mr. Burns was getting it, but at that time we're paying $330 an hour combined to do the same material.
And you give her that material before the meeting or
Correct.
after? Okay, so
Before the meeting.
she can look at it and think, oh, this might, I'm gonna be blurred with them.
No, she comes to all of them anyway, and that's generally, to answer questions on procedure, more or less. There are, statutory questions regarding the language of the ordinance, she would have to answer that. But she does review it, right?
So basically, she would flag it if like, hey, that you're kind of walking on risky ground here, or,
Yeah, you can't do this,
right?
statutorily prohibited, it's already covered by state
His
statute.
position would be more to give us guidance on our role on legislation. Hers is more, you're saying procedural.
But she would still, and I think I've got the statute in here somewhere, but I thought she still drafts legislation for the county council. So if you had something that you wanted, proposed, it's something that she could draft. And I thought I saw it statutorily, but I could be wrong.
So there's no real reason to have another involved.
To me, and the reason the council's used a council attorney in the past is they disagree with what the mayor of the executive branch is saying. They want a secondary opinion as to what the city attorney is saying. In that case, then they go to.
And his specialty is this type of law. And he said that his partner is very well versed in this type of law. For us
See, if
too.
I look at it budget-wise, it makes more sense for me, for you as the council to operate that way, is to operate with the fact that McKinsey basically does not represent the mayor. She's paid for to represent the city of Delphi. So McKinsey, we have a larger budgeted amount in the budget for McKinsey's service. You have a much smaller amount.
Right.
And which is deceiving because it says council clerk, but you don't pay for anything I need. Your budgeted amount is simply for your council, but it's much smaller. So if you utilize what McKinsey can offer, and then if there's differences of opinions, or you're then
I was gonna say, cause
you're
there
then
are
having
times,
issues,
yeah.
then that's when and for some reason you feel uneasy with McKinsey representing you at that point, then you should go to him to make sure that you're protected. But McKinsey's gonna represent you. She doesn't look at it that she represents the mayor, or she represents the council, or she represents me. If you talk to McKinsey or Abby, their whole reference is the fact they represent the city of Delphi.
So
they're
if
trying
one
to
of us
protect
wanted
it.
to talk with her about an issue prior to like a meeting or a vote, is that,
The previous council did that, I wouldn't say frequently, but they did it multiple times a year.
Sure.
Which, the possibility of looking forward, I could see, if we were gonna be using firms anyway, maybe, I would hope it only maybe happen a few times a year, so maybe, McKinsey can hit that later, and what does McKinsey charge per hour?
150? Sorry, I don't know why I said 330.
what is her legal expertise?
Everything. She does municipal laws. I think she does the area planning commission up in White County. But she does criminal law, she does civil law. In Carroll County, you don't have the opportunity to be a specialized municipal attorney.
I definitely do think this was helpful.
I'm sorry?
I do think this was helpful.
Yeah. I guess the code citation I did find is the head of the Department of Law, which is the city attorney, so we shall draft ordinances or other legal papers for the city and its departments, boards, commissions, and other agencies when requested by the proper officer. But I have no issue if you have an idea that you wanna bring up, take McKinsey and say, hey, could you draft something that would amend our ordinance, or create a new ordinance or repeal an old ordinance?
We could do that as an individual to her,
Well, I
and
think-
bring it up to the,
I think that's something the council should maybe set some rules for, as to, we don't want 5 people going to the city attorney for 2 hours a month every month.
right.
Not that I foresee that happening,
But then you're gonna have an expense there.
Yeah,
I mean,
Right.
That's,
exactly.
so I think maybe we need to keep his services available to us, and then if there's something that we see when we get our packet, that we say, hey, he needs to be here next Monday night, or he needs to be at the next meeting, or whatever, then I can contact him and, ask for his availability.
I guess, what would you want him to do at the meeting? You see something in your packet and you say, hey, he needs to be there, what would you?
I don't know, cause I don't know what's coming down the pipe, but I'm just thinking, I don't wanna just cut him loose and say we're not gonna use him at all.
No, I
don't think
think,
you
I
should.
think you should retain his
Okay,
services.
that's
Yeah.
kind of, I thought where the conversation was
No,
going.
No.
I was getting a little nervous.
No.
I'm thinking,
I think there could be an occasion where I say something, Mackenzie says something, you guys completely disagree, you interpret the law differently, and you go to Mr. Burns and say, hey, is there case law on this that, would support our argument?
So that's where we'd have to do like what you suggested, we'd have to table it until we could,
I think if you send it to him, he's gonna tell you whether you should be concerned. I
That's
mean,
possible.
without
Yeah.
making him come
Yeah,
up here, I
that's
think in
possible.
most cases, he's gonna be able to
Right.
tell you if you've got a
because for him
legitimate
to
concern.
drive and pay for that is,
Mhm.
And
And to,
I guess I would wanna limit it to, if there was something that you saw that you had concerns about, instead of just blanket, give
I
us
mean,
an
it may be
opinion on all
something
of
that
this.
none of us have any idea,
Okay,
or any prior knowledge. And so, and we may feel like we're out of our depth of knowledge on something that we really need. And it may be something that has more legal ramifications to us as a body. And we don't know all of the questions, and he might know, hey, I represented this city and I saw this come, and the council members got sued because they didn't, that's kind of where I'm thinking, that's where his support is gonna be to us. To protect us as well as to advise and guide us, because we don't know what all of the,
I think if I got something he said tonight though, so let's say that Mackenzie drafts something upon the mayor's recommendation, and she drafts something, and you have it at that first meeting, and this is what I interpreted from what he's saying tonight, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But at that first meeting, he's saying, you go ahead and you vote, and you put it on. You do the first out of three. You then have the big discussion. If that concern is there, then you should be feeding it to him.
right,
Because the city attorney has prepared this
Sure.
document, and she says it's good. Now, if you're concerned, then you should be sending that information
Right.
to him for clarification.
because we can get it on the table to discuss it with a motion and a second, and we don't necessarily have to vote on it that night. At that point, we can table it, because if we see something that we need clarification from, and I know that, Carolyn Pearson had spoken with me about, he's pretty good about only charging for the minutes he spends. He's not, like, if he sits down for
Yes.
10 minutes and looks at something, he's not gonna charge us for a full hour. He's gonna charge us for, a fifth of an hour or half an
Right.
hour, so,
So kind of going back to what she said, you said kind of a scenario there. Well, if, say, first reading passes,
Yeah.
we have concern, need to, maybe he's there. So that's kind of the one scenario. The second scenario would be that,
so it gets tabled, maybe, during discussion of a certain maybe ordinance or resolution, there's question of, hey, maybe we don't like this, it's kinda scary, let's table it. Maybe at that time, we should have a vote or whatever, get a majority, be like, hey, next meeting, let's get in here for this.
Mhm.
And kind of make that like an official, like, hey, this, we all have concerns about this, let's get it voted on and get in here next meeting, get it stopped to meet it.
and have him in attendance, or just have him look at some, yeah.
Right. So, it's officially there that it's been voted for, we all are in agreement that we're concerned about this, have them come.
or you would leave a motion that, we'll send this on the attorney if he thinks it's in our best interest for him to be available, or if he thinks it's better to send a memorandum back to us that says all the things that
Yeah,
you can report on it,
So
because
that's
I think he
official.
operates that way. I don't think he tries to bleed you at all.
No,
Yeah.
I
but
mean,
he
I
said
think if
too,
you
he
said something to him and he thought, okay, you're worrying
Yeah.
about nothing, he's gonna tell you that.
and don't be in a hurry to push something forward if you're
Yes.
not comfortable with it.
Yes.
I mean, especially in our newness.
But he also said, sorry, that first reading, there's no reason not to pass it, because you have 2 more readings after that to pass something, and you've got all this time, so
You
don't
get
get
2
afraid
more
of it.
times to either table, veto, or
Yeah,
whatever.
I do like
Or
that.
to amend it after,
That's a good point too.
Yeah,
because you've got 3 months.
Because it's not gonna do it.
And I know there's a couple ordinances, in your packet for next Monday that are not in final form and should not be passed in final form as they are, but it's just something to
Put on
start
the table.
going on.
One thing he mentioned tonight too was about going to recess for public comments. How do you guys feel about that? Like, not for everything that comes up, but if we feel like there's something, major, maybe like the ordinance violation issue. And it wouldn't happen the first meeting, it would happen probably the second meeting or the third meeting, most likely the second reading. How do you guys feel about doing that, opening? What are your thoughts on that? Okay.
Because there might be somebody has something to say, and saying at the end of the meeting after we vote, like you said, all that stuff.
Or, the first and second meeting, I could see it, like, by the third meeting.
So like
it's
on a resolution, there's just one vote, and if we take action, and then by the end, it's too late for people to, give us, and they can still have their input, but
Like you said, not everything.
do we need to have like a time limit for how long somebody could speak? Cause, I've said in meetings, and no offense to John Newman, but he can go on for half an hour,